Story 1, submitted by Mara Ellison from Red Hollow, Oklahoma, 1958. I never meant to stay the whole summer in Red Hollow. My father's cousin, Aunt Ruth, said she needed help on the farm after her husband passed, and my mother insisted, "It'll be good for you, Mara. Fresh air." So I arrived in June of '58 with a suitcase full of hand-me-down dresses and the impression that country life would be peaceful. I was wrong before the first week ended. The farm sat a mile outside the town proper, if you could even call it a town. One church, one diner, one feed store, and houses thinly scattered like they were avoiding one another. Ruth's place looked normal at first glance. Wide porch, sagging barn, windmill turning lazily against the sky. But the quiet was uneven. It dipped and swelled like something was breathing just behind the fields. The first scream came on my 5th night. It was near. Midnight, humid enough that my sheets clung to my legs. I'd left my window cracked to let the breeze in, and that's how I heard it. Sharp, high, and torn out of someone's throat with a panic so raw it snapped me upright in bed. Not an animal, not even close. A woman. "Aunt Ruth," I hissed, stumbling into the hallway. She opened her door before I reached it, wearing her housecoat and looking unsurprised. "Back inside, Mara," she whispered. "It's just foxes." That wasn't a fox. But she was. Already closing her door again, not slamming it, just easing it shut like she was afraid to wake someone. The scream didn't come back that night. But I didn't sleep either. By day, the farm was exhausting enough that I kept pushing the memory aside. Ruth had me cleaning the root cellar, hauling water, helping with the chickens. She was quiet, watchful. Her late husband's clothes still hung in the shed, stiff with dust and cobwebs. She never mentioned him unless she had to, and she never said how he'd died. Still, every night after the first scream, I kept the window nailed shut with an old wood wedge. It didn't matter. The screams came back, sometimes a single one, sometimes several spaced minutes apart, as if whoever made them was stopping to listen. Each night it grew closer to the house. Each night Aunt Ruth acted like nothing was happening. She never came out again after that first night, even when I pounded on her door. One night, after nearly 2 weeks of broken sleep, I snapped. When the scream pierced the dark, I grabbed my flashlight, marched outside barefoot, and aimed the beam toward the fields. The air smelled of iron and dry soil. The cornstalks rustled through there was no wind. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone hurt?" Another scream answered, much closer, maybe 30 yards from me, buried in the tall corn. A woman's voice, trembling with agony. I took a step forward, then another. Something moved between the rows, just far enough away that the flashlight could only carve out shifting silhouettes. Stalks bending, footsteps too large for a woman. I froze, pulse slamming in my ears. The screaming stopped. For a moment, the whole field seemed to lean toward me, listening. Then, deep in the rows, something inhaled, slowly, wetly, like air being pulled through torn cloth. I ran back to the house, bolted the door, and didn't sleep until dawn. The next morning, Ruth served cornbread in silence. She looked worn, even older than her 50-odd years, her hands trembling as she poured coffee. "You heard it too," I said. "Don't lie to me. What is it?" She stared into her cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Don't follow the screams, Mara. They're not coming from who you think." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. The next night, the screams started earlier, just after sunset. They circled the house like a predator testing a fence. Sometimes they sounded just inches from the walls, sometimes far away, but they were never in the same place twice. At midnight, Aunt Ruth knocked on my bedroom door. Her face was pale, her eyes wet. "Stay inside," she whispered, "no matter what you hear." Before I could reply, she walked downstairs, stepped onto the porch, and closed the front door behind her. "Aunt Ruth?" I called, panicking. Then I heard her voice, her scream. It shredded the night so violently I staggered. She screamed again and again, each time further from the house, as if something was dragging her. Across the yard. I ran to the front door and yanked it open. The porch was empty. The moon glinted off something wet smeared across the top step, fresh and red, leading toward the fields. "Aunt Ruth!" I shouted, sprinting after it. The corn swallowed me whole. My flashlight beam jittered over the rows, catching glimpses of the blood trail. Leaves brushed my arms like fingers. Every few seconds I thought I heard her voice, whimpering, choking, just ahead of me. But after a minute, the trail ended. In a small clearing where the soil was disturbed, as if something heavy had been dragged in a circle. No Ruth, no footprints, just silence. Then her scream ripped the air, coming from behind me, back toward the house. I spun, terrified, shining the light between the stalks. Nothing, only shadows. She screamed again, now farther away. How could she have moved that fast? I stumbled back toward the house, disoriented, turning again at another scream. This one to my right, then another behind me. They echoed from every direction, warping, stretching, growing deeper, like they were being pulled through a throat too long to be human. Then, directly in front of me, just inches beyond the flashlight beam, a woman's voice whispered, "Help me. Please." I lifted the light. There was no one. The corn parted. Something stepped forward. Not a woman. Not anything I recognized. Tall. Grayish skin stretched thin as paper. A mouth too wide, opening and opening until the scream that came out was Ruth's. Perfect and whole and wrong. It hadn't dragged her. It had learned her. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to the house, only that the porch light flickered as I slammed the door behind me. The screams continued outside until dawn. Ruth's voice, then others, dozens of them, echoing across the fields like a stolen choir. Come sunrise, they stopped. I left Red Hollow that morning with nothing but my suitcase. No one in town believed me. Not that I expected them to. They said Ruth must have wandered off in grief, that people hear strange things in the country at night. Maybe they're right. But sometimes I still dream of that whisper in the corn and the way it mimicked Ruth's voice, stretching her last plea into something hungry. And sometimes, late at night, when my window is open, I hear screaming from the yard, not distant, not outside, inside. Story 2, submitted by Daniel Danny Holt from Red Hollow, Oklahoma, 1958. My family didn't talk about the farmhouse on Ridgetop Road, even though my uncle owned it, and even though half our relatives had lived there at one time or another. If you asked, they'd go quiet or change the subject. The only thing anyone ever said plainly was that the place wasn't right, which could mean anything in rural Oklahoma: bad wiring, bad luck, bad neighbors. But in the summer of '58, when I was 19, and desperate to prove I wasn't just the runt of the Holt family, I volunteered to stay there for a week to help my uncle tear down the old Ian's storm shed. He laughed when I said it. "You won't make 2 nights," he told me, though he wouldn't explain why. I chalked it up to family superstition. But the moment I stepped inside the farmhouse, I had the sense you get after walking into a room someone just left. The warmth, the faint shift of air, except no one had lived there in years. The house sat high on a ridge, long shadows cast by gnarled oaks that looked older than Red Hollow itself. The place leaned a little, like it had one bad hip. But the bones were solid. Inside smelled of dust, old wallpaper paste, and something faintly coppery. My uncle handed me a ring of keys and said he'd be back before sundown the next day. He never came back. The first night passed quietly enough. I slept on a cot in the front room and kept a lantern burning, not because I was scared, but because the dark in that house felt layered, like there was a second darkness beneath the first, waiting for the lantern to slip. I must have dozed off around 2. I woke to a sound, a kind of scraping, soft at first. It came from under the floorboards, directly beneath my cot. I froze, listening. The scrape became a drag, slow, rhythmic. I imagined a raccoon or maybe a possum rooting around beneath the house. Then it knocked. 3 times. Solid. Deliberate. I sat up so fast the cot squealed on the wood floor. The knocking stopped. For a full minute, the house held its breath. Then I heard a voice. Not loud, not whispering, but muffled, like someone speaking. Through a thick door. "Danny?" Every hair on my arms rose. It sounded like my uncle. I got off the cot and stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall. The voice came again, clearer this time, as though the speaker had moved right beneath the boards. "Danny, you awake down here?" Down here. That phrasing made my stomach pitch. I told myself it had to be the wind, the way old houses funnel sound. Maybe my uncle had come back early, drunk, confused. But if he was outside, why did it sound like he was under the floor? I grabbed the lantern and edged toward the cellar door. It was in the kitchen, half-rotted, padlocked. My uncle had tossed me the key earlier, saying, "If you hear noises, don't go down there. Just throw some dirt along the threshold." I'd thought he was joking. But now, standing over the cellar door with the lantern trembling in my hand, I realized he hadn't been. The voice spoke again, directly beneath me now. "Danny, open the door." I dropped the keys. They clattered like gunshots in the quiet. A long silence followed. I thought maybe the voice, whatever it was, had retreated. Then something pressed up from below, bowing the cellar door upward by half an inch. The hinges strained. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. I backed away slowly, not daring to breathe until the pressure stopped. When dawn thinned the dark, I went outside, circled the house, and checked the cellar's exterior entrance. The door was sealed tight with rusted brackets, as if no one had opened it in decades. I told myself I'd imagined it. That one sleepless night had gotten to me. My uncle didn't show, which wasn't like him. I started demolishing the storm shed to keep myself busy. By afternoon, sweat was running into my eyes, and I heard something, or someone, moving in the house behind me. A shuffle, a pause, a dragging sound. "Uncle Ray?" I called. No answer. I stepped inside. The house air felt cooler, clammy almost. The cot was overturned. The lantern, which I'd left on the counter, was now sitting in the middle of the floor, and the cellar door, still locked, had new dents from underneath. Fresh ones. I left the house and waited outside until dusk. My plan was to sleep in the truck, but even from the ridge, I could hear the sounds coming from under the floorboards, thumps, drags, and something like nails scratching wood. Just past midnight, the truck battery died. That was the moment I knew I wasn't leaving until morning, if morning came. I returned to the farmhouse because it was either that or freeze outside. The moment I stepped in, every noise stopped. I felt watched, the way you feel walking into a room where a conversation has just ended. I locked the front door, then shoved the cot against it. The cellar door creaked once, as if shifting its weight. I backed into a corner with the lantern, watching shadows stretch like pulled taffy across the floor. Then the voice came again. My uncle's voice, but thinner now. Stretched, strained. "Danny, why did you leave?" "Me down here." I clamped my hands over my ears. "You're not him," I said. "You're not." A low chuckle bubbled up through the floorboards. "I learned him. Took a while. You humans have so many little sounds." The cellar door bowed upward again, harder this time. A crack split along one hinge. Something beneath the door scraped its nails, or claws, across the wood, testing its thickness. "Danny, let me finish learning you." The hinge popped. The lantern flickered. I grabbed the nearest thing, a crowbar, and ran straight for the porch door, kicking the cot aside. Behind me, the cellar door gave way with a wet, cracking sound. I didn't look back. I ran into the trees and hid until dawn. When sunlight finally touched the ridge, I crept back. The front door hung open. The cellar door lay splintered on the kitchen floor. The house was silent. My uncle never returned. Not that day, not ever. I left Red Hollow that morning and swore off that ridge for life. But even now, sometimes when the house settles at night, I hear that voice rising from beneath the floorboards of my memory. My uncle's voice, asking to be let out. The part that chills me most isn't the voice itself. It's knowing that whatever spoke to me that night is still learning, still listening, waiting for someone else to wander close enough for it to get the details right. It only needs a voice and a floor thin enough to knock through. Story 3. Submitted by Lillian Carter from Red Hollow, Oklahoma, 1958. Before the Mainai Highway came through, Red Hollow's farmland stretched unbroken for miles, a patchwork of wheat, soy, and cattle pasture where everyone knew which families owned which acres. My family had the Carter place, 140 acres of soil the color of old pennies. But the far edge of our land, down past the stock pond and the split-rail fence, belonged to the county. Nobody farmed it. Nobody improved it. It was just a flat, empty quadrant of reddish dirt with a single dead tree at its center. Growing up, my parents called it the Echo Lot. "You stay away from that tree," my father would warn. "Voices carry strange out there." I thought he meant it was just an acoustic quirk of the land, some odd, rural version of a whispering gallery. But the first time I heard the voice myself, I realized my father had left something out. It was late August of '58. A dry summer that left the air smelling of dust and dying crops. I'd just turned 22, newly returned from teacher's college, and feeling too old to obey childhood warnings. One evening after supper, I walked to the pasture's edge, humming to myself, letting the heat sink out of the sky. I don't know why I crossed the fence. Maybe to prove nothing was waiting for me. Maybe because the tree, skeletal as it was, seemed lonely. I was halfway to it when I heard my name. Lillian. Soft, crisp, as though spoken just behind my right shoulder. I turned. No one there. The fields behind me were empty all the way to the barn. I kept walking. "Lillian," the voice said again. This time it came from the direction of the tree. I felt a prickling along my scalp. The dead tree looked almost metallic in the evening light, its bark smooth and gray, as if it had been polished by sandstorms. No leaves, no nests, no branches less than 10 feet off the ground. "Who's there?" I called. The wind pressed against my back, blowing my dress forward. Dust swirled around my ankles. The voice replied, "Don't leave." I didn't run. Not yet. I stood rooted, staring at that tree, like staring hard enough might force an answer out of it. My heartbeat thumped in my throat. And then the voice spoke again, different this time, younger, familiar. "Lily, wait up." I hadn't heard that nickname in 10 years. It belonged to my brother Thomas, who died at age 12 when he slipped under the pump bridge and drowned. Hearing his voice made my knees buckle. My vision blurred, and I walked, numb and obedient, toward the sound. The temperature shifted when I reached the shadow of the tree. The air felt cooler, almost damp. The ground dipped as though hollow beneath the crusted earth. A faint smell rose, wet stone, old leaves, something blackened by fire long ago. "Tommy," I whispered. Something answered. Not with words, something like a breath, like someone leaning close enough that their exhale brushes your cheek. I staggered back. The tree's trunk looked different now, not smooth, not metallic, but ridged, thin vertical seams running top to bottom. And between two of those seams something shifted, just a flicker of movement, too quick to name. Then the voice returned, but wrong, too slow, too careful, sounding out each syllable like a person learning to speak. Leon, don't go." I ran, not gracefully, more like a newborn colt kicking dirt, nearly tripping over my sandals. The voice rose behind me, calling my name in tones I recognized, my mother's, my father's, my late brother's, each one melting into the next. By the time I crossed the fence, my lungs were burning. The sun had fully set. Behind me, the echo lot went silent again, dark except for the faint outline of the dead tree. I told myself I'd imagined the voices, but I didn't sleep that night, and by morning, I'd convinced myself to go back, just to prove it was ordinary land. But before I reached the fence, I saw something that made me stop cold. Footprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the dust of the echo lot, some large, some tiny, some with crispy detail like they'd been made minutes earlier. They all circled the dead tree in widening rings. But the part that made my stomach turn was this. All of the footprints faced inward, as though every person who'd stood there, however many there had been, was looking at the tree, watching it, waiting for something. My father found me standing at the fence, white as chalk. When I pointed at the prints, he swore under his breath, the first time I'd ever heard him swear. "You didn't step over that fence, Mom." "Last night, did you?" he asked. When I didn't answer, he closed his eyes like he was bracing for a blow. "They don't want us on that land," he said quietly. "Never have." "Who?" I asked. His jaw flexed. "Things that don't talk in their own voices." He hammered new boards across the fence that evening, then drove metal posts into the soil. But I still heard the voices at night, not calling from the field now, but drifting through my window screens. Sometimes it was my brother's laugh, sometimes my father calling me for supper, sometimes voices I didn't know at all, whispering in unfamiliar cadences. 3 nights later, something tapped the bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled back the curtain expecting a branch, but the nearest tree stood 20 yards from the house, and the tapping was too precise, too rhythmic. Outside, the darkness was deep enough to swallow the whole yard, but faintly, I heard it. "Lillian, come back." Not in my brother's voice, not my mother's, not any human voice. I stepped away from the window slowly, carefully, like stepping back from a cliff. The tapping continued a few more seconds before stopping abruptly. By morning, prints lined the outside of the house, dusty impressions circling my windows like something had been pacing there all night. Some prints were fresh, some half-faded, some impossibly small, like those of a child who'd never taken a full step. My parents moved us out of Red Hollow within a week. I've never gone back, though I still dream of that tree. Its seams widening, something inside shifting like an insect shedding its shell. And still, sometimes, just as I'm drifting to sleep, a voice brushes the back of my mind, not calling my name, but trying its shape, testing the sound of it, learning it, waiting for me to answer. Story 4, submitted by Howard Howie Brandt from Red Hollow, Oklahoma, 1958. I worked nights at the Red Hollow grain mill in '58, a squat concrete building that sat alone at the edge of the county road like a tooth knocked loose from town. My job was simple: monitor the augers, keep the hopper from clogging, and make sure the nighttime shipments were logged. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than the diner and kept me out of my parents' house. The mill had one problem, though: bats. Or at least that's what we told ourselves whenever wings rustled in the rafters or dust drifted down from beams too dark to see. Bats were easier to believe than the alternative. On the night everything went wrong, the air hung heavy with the smell of grain dust and machine oil. I was halfway through my shift, sipping burnt coffee from a metal thermos when I heard it, a scream, short, sharp, and unmistakably human. It came from inside the mill. The grain grinder droned on, hiding the direction, but the scream carried enough force to slice straight through the machinery's roar. I dropped my thermos, coffee splattering across the concrete, and grabbed the nearest tool, a thick-handled steel hook used for clearing grain blockages. "Anyone here?" I called. No answer. I shut off the main auger, and silence spread through the mill like a held breath. Dust particles drifted in the sudden stillness, glittering in the beam of my flashlight. The place had always felt too big at night, but now it felt cavernous, like the walls had pulled farther apart. A scraping noise echoed from somewhere up near the rafters. Then, another scream, not loud this time, not even sharp. more like someone gasping after being held underwater too long. I swept my light upward. The rafters were a tangled lattice of beams and old pulley tracks. Something shifted up there, sending a drift of dust down like ash. "Hello?" I said again, weaker this time. A soft tapping began, tick, 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 like fingernails striking the metal roof. It traveled from one end of the building to the other, too fast for footsteps. I backed toward the office, thinking maybe I could lock myself inside and call the sheriff. But before I reached the door, a voice drifted down from the rafters. "Howie?" I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. It sounded like my co-worker Ed Talbert, the one who'd gone missing 2 weeks earlier. Folks said maybe he skipped town, maybe he owed someone money, maybe he fell into the river after too much whiskey. But that voice above me was Ed's. Same drawl, same little rasp on the H. "Howie, I need a hand." Against every instinct screaming in my skull, I walked toward the sound. "Ed, where are you?" "Up." "Here," the voice answered. But the direction felt wrong. It echoed from the rafters, then from the far wall, then from the hopper, as if the mill itself were speaking with his throat. "I got stuck," the voice said. "Come help me down." My beam landed on something hanging from a chain near the western rafters, something shaped like a man, but slumped forward, limp as a burlap sack. "Ed?" I breathed. The figure twitched. Not the sluggish twitch of a person waking up. A twitch like something, adjusting its weight inside a skin that wasn't built for it. The chain creaked. Dust rained down. Then the figure raised its head. It had Ed's face. But wrong, too pale, stretched in places, as if the skin had been pulled over something larger underneath. The eyes were sunken, mismatched, the left one too far from the bridge of the nose, and the mouth, God help me, the mouth opened too wide. "Howie," it said again in Ed's voice. "Come help me, I can't hold on." I staggered backward. My boot clipped. A coil of rope sending me sprawling. The flashlight skittered across the floor, its beam swinging wildly. In that thin arc of light, I saw movement, something climbing down the chain behind Ed's slumped imitation. Long limbs, too many joints, a shine like wet bone. The voice came again, wobbling now, as if the creature was losing the shape of it. How? I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the loading bay. Behind me, the chain snapped. A heavy, wet thud shook the floor. I didn't look back. I shoved open the bay door and sprinted out into the night air, lungs burning with dust. The wheat fields rustled under the moonlight, dark waves rippling out to the horizon. I made it as far as the gravel drive when I heard the footsteps, fast, skittering, too many limbs hitting the ground at once. Then a voice floated out after me, but not Ed's anymore. It had shifted higher, lighter. My mother's voice. "Howie, sweetie, come back inside." I nearly vomited from fear. I ran toward the road, gravel slicing my palms as I scrambled over the ditch. My truck was parked half a mile away. I didn't dare go to it. Instead, I sprinted down the road barefoot, praying for headlights, for anything human. Behind me, the voice followed, morphing with each call. My father, my sister, old teachers, childhood friends. Voices I hadn't heard in years. Voices that should have been impossible. Each one said the same thing, in the same too slow cadence. "Let me in." When I reached the sheriff's station, I collapsed on the steps. The deputies found me shaking so violently they thought I'd been poisoned. When I told them what happened, they sent a pair of men to check the mill. They found nothing. No body, no creature, no broken chain. Just dust disturbed across the rafters like something had nested there a long time and left abruptly. I never went back. I left Red Hollow within the month. But I still think about the sound the chain made as it snapped, and the shape that moved behind Ed's almost face. And I wonder whether the thing that spoke to me in the mill that night was hunting all along, or simply mimicking, waiting for someone who would believe the voice it borrowed. That's the part that keeps me up, Because sometimes, late at night, I hear someone walking across my attic, slow, dragging footsteps, followed by a familiar voice calling down the air vent, "Howie, help me down." And the voice is getting closer, stronger, more accurate, learning.